and Dr. Felix Aduyobo, Deputy Director and Special Advisor at the SDG Advisory Unit of the Office of the President. Business PM is proudly brought to you in partnership with the Center for Sustainable Transformation. Many thanks for your company tonight. With me, Emmanuel, Aboagye-Wiafe, and of course is the SDG-Hub, where every Tuesday we discuss opportunities and solutions for every business to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs as we call them for short. As you probably know by now, the SDGs are 17 goals with targets and indicators for sustainable development agreed on by UN member states, including Ghana, to make the world a more just, equitable, greener and peaceful place by the year 2030. On the SDG Hub, we introduce you to business opportunities and activities that help us to achieve the SDG goals here in Ghana and beyond. I'm doing this with
Rosemary Balami.
All right, so Rosemary is from the Young Reporters for the Environment, YRE, at the Center for Sustainable Transformation. Thursday, the 8th of June, marks World Ocean Day, and our oceans are said to be under threat from various factors. Climate change, plastic pollution, and sea level rise are such growing concerns in West Africa and indeed Ghana. Unfortunately, many people have already been forced to abandon their homes and livelihoods due to coastal erosion. Coastal erosion is a pressing issue in Ghana, and the combination of natural processes and human activities have accelerated the erosion of Ghana's coastline, leading to significant economic, environmental, and social impacts.
Yes, Emmanuel, this is a serious issue and it gets worse year by year. About 7% of Ghana's land area is considered coastal, and about a quarter of the country's population reside in these areas, as are rapidly growing cities like Accra, Takoradi Tema, and the others by the sea. Listen to this, some 37% of the country's coastal land was lost to erosion and flooding between 2005 and 2017. For those of you watching the live stream, you will see some photos of how we have to protect our land now from Ada to Axim. This is how far CeST, that's the Center for Sustainable Transformation, has traveled to observe the situation. It is probably also the same further west. Almost 4,000 people living in the coastal areas in the Volta region were displaced after a weekend tidal surge swept through more than 500 houses in 2021. In some areas, the shoreline retreated as much as 100 meters, destroying everything in its path, including people's homes, natural landing sites for fishermen, nesting places for turtles, and habitats for other animals, leaving some people homeless with destroyed livelihoods, while others have been displaced and some animals left on the brink of extinction. This adds to the pollution and overfishing of our vulnerable seas, discussed at length on the first National High-Level Blue Economy Summit, which we will also hear more about today.
Absolutely, and we are pleased to be joined in, of course, not in the studio, but via Zoom. Tonight we are joined via Zoom by our guests who will be helping us explore the importance of protecting our oceans and the impact of sea level rise and tidal waves on our coastline. Our guest tonight, once again, Professor Divine Ahadzie, Head of Center for Settlement Studies, Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, Kumasi, and Dr. Felix Aduyobo, Deputy Director and Special Advisor at the SDG Advisory Unit at the Office of the President here in Accra. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening. Good evening to your listeners, and good evening to Doc.
Doc, are you
Thank
there?
you very much for having us on the show, and good evening to Professor Ahadzie and your guests.
And we are privileged for both of you having time to come on the show. Like we do always, we would like you to tell us briefly about your work. What do you do by the day? Let me start with you first, Prof.
Thank you very much. And so I'm a professor of construction and human settlement development, and also, as you said, head of the Center for Settlement Studies at the KNUST. And so typically my work involves undertaking pure and applied research targeted at sustainable housing solutions towards addressing policy issues for urban and rural housing. But then with the environmental problems that we have been facing of late, most of our research together with our partners have moved into the settlement area, looking at sustainable development issues, especially Goal 3, 6, and 11, all towards addressing issues that can be targeted for policy directions to advise government.
Fantastic. Let's also hear from Dr. Aduyobo. Could you tell us a bit about yourself and the work you do at the SDG Office of the Presidency?
Right. Thank you very much. My day-to-day work actually involves coming up with innovative and catalytic actions to support the implementation of the SDGs. You know, there are 17 of them cutting across all sectors of the economy. And I do this to support the president in its role as SDG advocate, his global role as an SDG advocate. And then also recently in its role as a member of the high-level panel on for sustainable ocean economy.
Okay.
And it is in that context that we organize the Blue Economy Summit.
Absolutely well. Now, so when you say catalytic activities, what do you mean by that?
Okay, so essentially I mean actions that we could leverage on to accelerate the implementation of the SDGs. So, for instance, one of the critical challenges facing the implementation of the SDGs in this part of the world is financing. And so the question then is, first of all, how much do we need to finance the SDGs?
Okay.
Where are the traditional sources of funding? What other innovative means of financing mechanisms can we put in place? So my unit has done some work on this.
All right.
And passed the baton on to Ministry of Finance to employ some of these innovative actions and interventions to speed up the implementation of the SDGs.
Okay. All right. Let's start the discussion now. And I'm still beginning with you, Doc. Being facilitators of the just ended Blue Economy Summit and with the World Ocean Day just 2 days away, could you tell us why it is important to turn the spotlight on oceans in Ghana and what were the main objectives of the summit?
Thank you once again. The main objective of the summit was to throw the spotlight on the challenges that the ocean face and to drum home the importance of the ocean within our national development context, to promote urgent actions to safeguard the ocean, and then last but not the least, to drum home the enormous benefits that the ocean has to offer that all these years have remained untapped, so that we can leverage those benefits to accelerate national development and bring about the transformation we need.
And so what were the outcomes of this summit? And are we going to see more events like this, knowing that the president is the co-chair on the International High-Level Panel for the Ocean?
Yes, so this is the big bang to kickstart a number of initiatives. In terms of outcomes, among the stakeholders, there was a general consensus for the need to protect the ocean because our lives as humanity depends very much on the ocean, and the ocean provides enormous amounts of benefits, both to the planet and then to humanity. Also drummed home the need to integrate climate change considerations in our development actions. And like it was mentioned in the introduction, climate change is having enormous impact on the sea or the ocean, with ramifications for human settlements, and we need to act in that line. And then lastly, I can talk about the need to forge innovative partnerships, because around the table, we all agreed that one party cannot do this alone. We need to work together with academia, with traditional leaders, civil society, youth groups, etc., to give us a good chance to effectively protect our ocean and to maximize the benefits that the ocean provides.
Now, we've not focused too much on the health of the oceans in the past. And so how are you going to follow up further on these outcomes?
Great question. And so the first point is on awareness creation. We need to make the noise. We need to create awareness and to mobilize a critical mass of willing people who will, as it were, walk the talk and champion ocean action. And so some initiatives are ongoing. We will engage a wide range of actors to give us a good chance of getting the message home. And when we talk of protecting the health of the ocean, it cuts across several areas. Certainly land-based activities like waste management, both liquid and solid, galamsey is affecting the ocean. But then also some ocean-based activities like fishing practices using dynamite, carbides, all sorts of dodgy things in fishing. And then also the practices of the shipping lines. How do they manage their waste when they're out there in the sea? What sort of chemicals they use to paint the ships, etc. All these have effects on the health of the ocean. So it's a wide raft of issues that we need to address, but it starts with awareness creation, getting a critical mass of people to come along. And I think gradually we are succeeding on that front.
All right. We'll come back to you. But Prof, something we learned or something that came up at the Blue Economy Summit is how some key infrastructure in the country is located close to the coast. For example, the N1, which connects the east to the west. Heritage sites such as Elmina and Cape Coast Castle, and even our capital city, Accra. Naturally, then some of the pressing issues facing coastal communities and our country as a whole are rising sea levels and tidal waves, which have already dealt a deadly blow to some communities already. What do we mean by some of these terms?
Come again? Which?
I mean, we're talking about, the fact that the key infrastructure in the country are located to the coast or in the coastal area. And so we have rising sea levels, tidal waves also lurking around. What do we mean by these, and how important are these to communities along the coast?
Well, thank you very much. I think, as you know, the coast is a dynamic system and always going through adjustment in terms of forms and processes, and these natural processes is what, for instance, river discharges, you have soil subsidence and others, which are natural issues that leads to the sea level rise, and it tends to lead to what we call the continuous hazard, in the sense that it is very slow and unnoticeable. So most of the time, we don't notice those ones as hazards because they are very slow and takes very long time. It is when the issue of storm surge or tidal waves comes in, that is where you become aware that something is happening. But actually, the sea level rise is something that is always continuous as part of the coastal dynamics. And that is why it is important that we look at the issue of climate change, because apart from the natural aspect, which is so slow that we don't notice, it is rather the human aspect which tends to dominate. And that is where we begin to feel these problems of how it will affect the infrastructure. So, for instance, if you look at the literature, since 1980, what we call the anthropogenic factors have been observed to be causing the sea level to rise, and by anthropogenic, I mean the human activities that are carried out, which includes, of course, the road construction, as you are saying,
right,
and then infrastructure, as part of it.
But Prof, before you even continue, it's not all the coastal communities that witness some of these, hazards like tidal waves and things like that. It's not along every coastal community. Why or what are the main factors contributing to Ghana's coastal vulnerability?
Well, it's good you ask that question, and it will all boil down to the kind of in terms of the physical and what we call nature-based techniques or solutions that are put into play to be able to manage the situation. But to come to your question, let me first say that even if you take the issue of flood in general, in 2021, the data suggests that across the world we experienced about 223 floods across the world. And as you know, about 21% of the world population lives in the coastal areas. And it is suggested that about 46 million per year experience some form of flooding in terms of the storm surge. And so you are right in saying that some areas will tend to experience it, and then some other areas might not experience it. But that will come down to the interplay of the societal and nature causes that are influencing. So, for instance, if you take the Keta area, for instance, it is observed from the literature that when the sea defense was constructed, even though it solved the problem in part of the areas, it's also created problems in areas that, as you are saying, normally will not observe tidal waves. So those are the dynamics that are in place.
Okay, Prof.
And so I think that if you want to understand this clearly, we will need to understand how to be able to mingle or integrate the local knowledge of those communities that have been able to successfully mitigate flooding as against the physical infrastructure that we use, and then we learn lessons from it as part of it and transfer it to other areas. And so I think that is something that will be an opportunity for us, especially as one of the areas that is now being propagated is nature-based solutions, to be able to help in that direction.
Okay, Prof. So on the issue of solutions, for instance, yesterday was World Environment Day, with a theme Beat Plastic Pollution, in which I personally participated in an eco-school event at St. John Bosco under the Plastic Free School Pilot, which is aimed at decreasing the amount of microplastics which end up in marine bodies. Another big threat to our planet as a whole, and the ocean in particular, is plastic pollution and climate change, which you made mention of. So how has climate change impacted the frequency and intensity of tidal waves along Ghana's coast?
Okay, when it comes to the issue of climate change, I think that now we have even moved beyond this discussion, because it is already established all over the world, including Ghana, that due to the warm weather, the temperature is rising and it's affecting the seashore, and so that is established. And I think in going into the solution, those areas are things that maybe we should not, because if you look at the data, since for the last 21 years, it is established in Ghana that the sea level has risen by 5.3 centimeters. And this is accounting for about 30% of the observed annual coastal erosion, which means that for the past 21 years, we are experiencing about 2 meters of erosion every year. So there's no issue about it that whether the climate change is not happening. It's happening, and we have the data. The issue is it's happening all over the world, and in some areas have severe situations than others, as is it Adoyebo?
Adoyebo,
yes, just mentioned.
So you made mention also of the human impact. So now
that's what I'm coming to.
How do local communities in Ghana respond to challenges?
So for instance, one of the areas that both at the Ghanaian and the global level is, for instance, integrating the local knowledge in terms of nature-based solutions, and then especially one area that we have not taken very strong cue to is the use of mangroves to be able to help us and also integrate it into our coastal defense systems. So, for instance, my own understanding of the area, if you look at even the Keta area and areas, is that the mangroves are rather being cut down for firewood and other things, instead of a conscious attempt for them to be planted. And I have an example at Pamba Bay in Indonesia, where the community, through conscious effort, have been able to use mangroves plantation to be able to help to mitigate coastal flooding, and at the same time help them in their ecotourism, in the sense that through mangrove, you can get, for economic value, mangrove crabs, syrups, coffee, tea, bread, and other things, which has become a kind of tourist attraction and also income generating for the community. And so, if you look into the literature, you realize that, and here I'm not saying government has not done enough. Government has done enough, but it looks like our discussion focus more on the physical structure as against integrating local knowledge and the community into it. And so I think that, I don't know, maybe where doctor has some current information on how maybe things are going now. But in the past, it was established that these sea defense were done without recourse to integrating the local people and local knowledge and nature-based solutions into them, with the assumptions that once physical infrastructure is constructed, it will help solve the problem. So I think if this is still missing in the narration, this is where we need to be looking at critically to see how we can begin to bring the community on board, because I've done.
So, Prof, you made mention of a government intervention, like the sea defense walls that we keep seeing, and then some even say that they are all ad hoc solutions. So, what are the effects of these, and are there any other innovative engineering or technological solutions that we can explore to combat the effects of this sea rising, levels and coastal erosion in the country?
Yeah, thank you very much. So, you cannot discount the sea defense. It's part of the solution, but the issue is, all over the world, it has proven that sea defense alone cannot solve the problem effectively. And so what we are asking for is integrating with other systems, and that's why I've mentioned the example of nature-based solutions, which relies on taking advantage of the local knowledge of the community and integrating them into whatever physical structure has to be constructed. And the example is what I've cited by giving you the example in Pamba Bay in Indonesia, where mangrove has been used in a systematic approach.
Yes.
Because if you look at the Accra area, my own investigation of the area suggests that there is no community action in terms of how they can address the problem. They are just there and hoping that government will come and construct a sea defense and it will solve the problem. But then the community action, in terms of them also mobilizing themselves and understanding the situation,
it's an issue.
It's very critical. It's an issue.
Let's also get to Dr. Idoyobo. Doc, were there any specific policies discussed during the summit on the protection of coastal communities in Ghana in different regards?
No, the summit was not to discuss specific policies, but they want to look at broad overview of what can be done and what should be done. And I do very much agree with Prof that it was generally agreed that the hard engineering solutions do not always cut it, and it's important that we look critically at nature-based solutions and also make good use of indigenous knowledge. And I'm happy to say that government is in the process of securing some funds from the World Bank for a coastal area project. And one of the key components of this project is nature-based approach to protecting coastal communities and making them more resilient. So that would be done going forward, and I'm sure in the next few months or so we will see action on this. And I'd want to add my voice to the need to pay attention to mangroves, because they, in as much as they also help protect our shorelines, they have several ecological benefits, and also they tend to be even better at storing carbon dioxide than our forests. And so if we do that effectively, just by maintaining our mangroves, we could get carbon credits, and that could bring in chunks of money to support climate change, climate action.
I guess you're talking about carbon credits, and of course, it's one of the innovative ways to make money. But let's come back to you, Doc. What are the potential economic and social consequences of coastal vulnerability in the country?
Oh, it's enormous. A vast stretch of Ghana's coastline is very susceptible to the effects of climate change. We see coastal erosion, tidal surges washing away communities. But like you said in your introduction, a number of critical infrastructure in Ghana are dotted along our coastline. You can talk about the Atuabo gas plant, you talked about the roads, you talked about our castles and forts. Several very important infrastructure are within the coastal belt. And so it's very important that we re-engineer or reconfigure our coastal areas to make them more resilient to the effects of climate change and other hazards that we are exposed to. If we don't, it can easily erode several of the gains that we have made as a country. The huge monies that we borrowed to build this infrastructure will just be washed away and it becomes a white elephant. Lives will be affected. Communities will be effectively washed away, and the impacts are very enormous. And I think that if we need to invest huge amounts of money within the coastal areas to make them more resilient, the benefits will far exceed the cost incurred, and it's something we need to do.
Let me come back to you, Prof. So research is, now crucial to monitoring progress and creating solutions. Are there any ongoing research initiatives or projects in the country focused on understanding the issue of rising sea levels? Prof.
Oh, yeah. I would say there are a number of them going on, though I would say that from our perspective of the Center for Settlement Studies, we currently are focusing on most of our studies have been in Kumasi and also the main inland of Accra. But if you look at Kibas and other foreign universities, there are a lot of people who are also doing research specifically. For instance, I know colleagues who have published in the Journal of Coastal Development, International Journal of Risk Discussion. So a lot of studies are going on.
Done.
And I think the findings are also very interesting in the sense that it comes down to the issue of bringing the community on board, especially related to risk awareness.
Okay.
And there's one study which is suggested that that is a problem here because most of the people, about 81%, tend to believe that the sea level rise and things that are happening is something attributable to God and not to climate change issues, And that will mean that if you want to bring such people on board for any coastal conservation strategy, you need to be able to convince them. And I think that is the area that we as stakeholders, including government, have to work very hard for the people to be able to appreciate that what is going on is not a matter of caused by God, but rather it's part of the climate change, and we all need to be on board to be able to address it.
This is where time will allow us. Unfortunately, we need to end this conversation. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today to share your expertise and valuable insights. It has been an enlightening discussion. Make sure to tune in same time next week as we continue discussions on all things sustainable development right here on Asaase Radio 99.5 so that people and the planet can prosper. If you have any topics you would like us to discuss, shoot an email to info@cestinc.org or send a message to our social media platforms at Wayari Ghana. Also, don't forget to vote for my co-host, Emmanuel Aboagye-Wiafe, for the Energy Media Personality of the Year Award. To short code *920*86#, enter nomination code TE5 for the Think Energy SDGs Awards 2023.
And thank you so much once again for staying with us. On the SDG-Hub, we've been speaking with Professor Divine Ahadzie, Head of Center for Settlement Studies, Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, Kumasi, and Dr. Felix Adeyobo, Deputy Director and Special Advisor at the SDG Advisory Unit at the Office of the President. I've been your host, Emmanuel Aboagye-Wiafe, and I did this with
Rosemary Balami.
We go back to Wilberforce to wrap up the big bulletin.